And that's how karma caught up, quietly, perfectly, and right on time. Frank lost everything because of his own arrogance. And I didn't have to lift a finger, just stayed honest, stayed smart, and let the truth do the work for me. So the next time someone tries to throw you under the bus, and remember, don't chase revenge and let karma do its job. It's way more satisfying that way. If this story gave you chills or made you smile, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever seen someone get the karma they deserved? And if you love stories where justice always finds its way, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we serve justice one story at a time. They weren't a Fortune 500 giant, but they were comfortable. They had money, they had buildings, and they liked to think they had things under control. One of those buildings had burned to the ground, a total loss, and they wanted to collect on their insurance. Now, instead of letting me, their lawyer, handle the process, they put a man named Frank in charge. Frank was pushing 60. He'd been with the company forever, and he wore that seniority like armor. The kind of guy who thought experience automatically made him right. When I first called him to offer help, he brushed me off. "I've got this," he said. "I've dealt with insurance claims before. Lawyers just make things complicated and expensive." I could practically hear the smirk through the phone. Frank was one of those guys who got a little thrill out of not paying for legal help. He'd brag about how he saved the company, a few $1,000s here and there. Never mind that his penny pinching usually cost them 10 times more later. I'd dealt with him for years. He'd always try to argue down my fees, nitpick every line of an invoice, act like he knew better than someone who actually went to law school. Still, I had a bad feeling about this. Insurance companies are predators. They smile, they nod. They drag things out with polite little requests for just a bit more documentation. But behind that mask, and they're waiting for one thing, for you to miss the deadline. Because when that limitation period expires, your right to sue disappears forever. So when I found out about the fire, by pure luck, mind you, because Frank didn't even tell me, I called him right away. "Frank," I said, "you need to move on this fast. The insurer's going to screw you. It's what they do." He laughed. "You don't know that," he said. "Everything's under control. I get along great with the adjuster." That's when I knew he was in trouble. Because if there's one thing I've learned, the moment someone says I get along great with the adjuster, it means they're being played. Still, I tried to do my job. I pushed him to send me the proof of loss form, just to make sure he hadn't messed it up. He finally did, and surprisingly it was fine. But that didn't make me feel any better. "Frank," I warned him again, "the insurer's stalling. They're not going to pay. Once the limitation period passes, they'll stop taking your calls." He sighed. "You worry too much." "No, Frank, I get paid to worry. And I'm telling you, sue them now. Let me handle it and you'll get the money." He brushed me off again. He didn't want to pay my fees, didn't want to hear that he could be wrong. So I did what I could. I sent him an email, then another, and another, each one clearly warning him about the 2-week deadline. Finally, the day before I left for a trial, I sent one last message. "Frank, I'll be unavailable for a couple of weeks. If you don't act now, it'll be too late. You need to sue before the limitation expires. If you don't, the insurer will tell you to jump in the lake." No reply. I went to trial shaking my head, already half expecting disaster. Weeks went by. My trial wrapped up and I realized I hadn't heard a word from Frank. No emails, no calls, nothing. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd managed to pull it off. Maybe the insurer actually paid up. Maybe for once Frank got something right. Then one afternoon my phone rang. "Hey, remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about?" I recognized his voice immediately. "Oh yeah," I said, already bracing myself. "So they paid out?" "That's great, Frank. You were right after all." There was a pause. Then he asked, "Can I see a copy of the claim?" I frowned. "What claim?" "You know," he said, his voice suddenly tight. "The claim you filed against the insurer." My stomach dropped. "Frank, are you saying the insurer didn't pay?" He didn't answer. He just hung up. Seconds later, my email pinged. It was Frank. A long, frantic email and claiming that he had told me to sue, that he was now worried he hadn't received a copy of the claim, and he was just following up. I couldn't believe it. The man had ignored months of warnings, and now that his mistake had cost the company millions, he was trying to rewrite history. He was trying to throw me under the bus. I sat there staring at my screen, feeling that slow burn rise up my neck. That familiar anger, the one you feel when someone's trying to ruin you to cover their own incompetence. This was it. The exact situation my old mentor had warned me about. "Clients will screw you," he'd said. "They'll throw you under the bus and they won't think twice." And Frank was living proof. That night I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying every warning I'd given him, every email I'd sent. I knew I'd covered myself. But I also knew how messy things could get when someone starts pointing fingers. So the next morning, I did what I should have done months ago. I wrote an email, carefully, precisely, laying out exactly what had happened. And I CC'd not just Frank, but his boss and his boss's boss, and the company's in-house counsel, a man named Bill. It didn't take long for Bill to respond. He called me that afternoon. "Frank messed up," he said right away. "We know that. He's an idiot. So what do we do now?" I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. "So his excuses didn't work?" I asked. Bill sighed. "No, we called him into a meeting. He tried to claim he told you to sue, but we've seen your emails. It doesn't add up." He was right. If Frank had told me to sue, he wouldn't have kept emailing the insurer afterward. The company knew he was lying. "So that's it?" Bill asked. "We just lost a couple $1,000,000? That's when I smiled, because even though I hadn't been asked to act, I had. When I realized Frank was about to mess this up, I told him. "I filed the claim myself." There was a long pause. Then Bill said, "You sued without instructions?" "Yep." He laughed, half relief, half disbelief. "Lawyers aren't supposed to do that." "I know," I said. "But I'd rather be wrong and get yelled at than sit by and watch your company lose millions because someone didn't want to listen." I pulled up the document and emailed him a copy right then. "It's rough," I said, "but it'll hold. We can fix the details later." "Thank God," he said. "You just saved us." He wasn't exaggerating. That one act, taking initiative when I technically shouldn't have, had preserved their right to sue and saved them from losing everything. And Frank? Well, his reckoning was just beginning. A few days later, I got another call. Different voice this time. Someone else from the company. "Hey," the guy said quietly, "we, had a situation today." "What kind of situation?" He hesitated. "Frank's gone." It turned out they'd called Frank into another meeting. This time there was no discussion. No excuses, just a one-page letter on the table. They let him pack his things into a little box. Then security walked him past his co-workers, the same ones he'd bragged to about saving money, straight to the elevator. That was it. His career, his pride, all gone. And as harsh as it sounds, I didn't feel sorry for him. Because he hadn't just been careless. He'd been willing to destroy my reputation to save his own skin. Sometimes karma just needs a little push. You'd think that once Frank was gone, the story would be over. But life doesn't tie itself up neatly like that. See, when someone like Frank falls, they don't just vanish quietly. They leave behind wreckage, unfinished files, half-truths, missing documents, and the sour taste of mistrust. And this time I was the one stuck cleaning up the mess. For weeks I was buried in his paperwork, sorting through emails, memos, and insurance letters. Every page told the same story. Frank had been bluffing his way through the whole thing. He hadn't kept proper records, hadn't responded to half the insurer's questions, and in a few cases, he'd even lied. He'd sent letters saying I was handling things that I'd never seen before. He'd dropped my name in meetings, pretended I'd approved things I hadn't. It was a miracle the company hadn't fired him sooner. So I pulled everything together, timelines, documents, proof that the claim was still alive because I'd filed that lawsuit, and I sent it all to Bill, the in-house counsel. 2 hours later, my phone rang. "Can you come in tomorrow?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "What's up?" "We just want to go over your notes, and maybe talk about something else." The next morning, I walked into their headquarters in a big glass building downtown. Everyone seemed a little tense, whispering, avoiding eye contact. When I reached the conference room, Bill was waiting with the company president and 2 board members. I sat down. Bill smiled. "Relax, you're not in trouble." Then he turned to the others. "This is the guy who saved us." They nodded. One of them even stood up to shake my hand. I wasn't expecting that. Lawyers rarely get thanks. Usually we just get blamed when things go wrong. The president said, "We reviewed everything. If you hadn't filed that claim, we'd have lost it all. You probably saved this company millions." I shrugged. "Just doing my job." But then he leaned forward. "Frank tried to blame you," he said. "He said you ignored him, said you never warned him. That's why we looked into everything." I raised an eyebrow, and Bill grinned. "And your emails made him look like an absolute fool. Every warning, every reminder and all there. He tried to lie and he got caught." That was satisfying to hear. Because while I never wish anyone misery, I do believe in consequences. And Frank had earned his. A week later, the insurer blinked. They realized they couldn't dodge the lawsuit anymore. Within months, we reached a settlement, a number that made everyone happy. The company called me again, asking me to handle more of their work. Bigger projects, better contracts, and this time, full authority. No middlemen like Frank. And then one day something unexpected happened. I got a call from a small firm across town. They said a man named Frank had applied for a consulting role there and listed me as a reference. I nearly laughed. "Really?" I said. "Frank listed me?" The woman on the other end chuckled. "Yeah, but something felt off, so I figured I'd check." I paused for a second, considering how to answer. "I can't tell you who to hire," I said finally. "But if you value honesty and accountability, Frank's not your guy." She laughed softly. That's all I needed to hear. Click. End of call. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but that was my revenge. No shouting, no lawsuits, no smear campaigns. Just quiet truth spoken when it mattered most. Months passed and life went on. Work stayed busy, the company kept growing, and every once in a while Bill would bring up Frank's name with a little grin. "Remember that guy?" he'd say. "Yeah," I'd reply. "Wonder what he's doing now." But honestly, I didn't wonder much. Because by then I'd learned something my old mentor never told me. Sometimes you don't need to fight to win. Sometimes just standing your ground, keeping your integrity. When someone else throws theirs away, is revenge enough? And that's the funny thing about karma. It doesn't always arrive when you expect it. It doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just quietly balances the scales, while you sit back and keep doing what's right. So if anyone's ever tried to blame you for their mess, if they've tried to drag your name through the mud while pretending to be innocent, don't panic. Document everything. Stay calm. And trust that the truth eventually catches up. Because in the end, it always does. And that's how karma caught up. Quietly, perfectly, and right on time. Frank lost everything because of his own arrogance. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Just stayed honest, stayed smart, and let the truth do the work for me. So the next time someone tries to throw you under the bus, remember, don't chase revenge, let karma do its job. It's way more satisfying that way. If this story gave you chills or made you smile, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever seen someone get the karma they deserved? And if you love stories where justice always finds its way, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We serve justice one story at a time.